Good morning. Here we are again. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, will you? I know it's grand final weekend, both here in Melbourne and Brisbane, but I still want to go on and share a little more about the scriptures with you. And the text today is Jesus sends the disciples out to proclaim the good news of the kingdom and to heal. Now, we know a lot about proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, but maybe we know a little less about healing. And so I want to look first at Jesus' healing ministry with you and some of the examples of that. And the first one that comes to mind is when Jesus healed the man with the withered hand. And he also healed the woman who had curvature of the spine for 12 years. Now he healed them and they returned to their work, their family, their normal life. Another one is Bartimaeus. He was a blind man. He was sitting on the side of the road in Jericho, and he called out loudly enough, so Jesus summoned him. And he came, and Jesus said to him, in front of the public, the people there, "What is it that you want me to do for you?" And so he restored to Bartimaeus not just his sight, but also his dignity. And another one is the lepers. Jesus went out and touched the lepers, to whom nobody was allowed to associate or to get near. And so Jesus legally made himself impure, so that they would be freed, healed of their isolation. They had to live apart. They had to wear bells. And he released them from that. He healed them from that. And they could return to their families and their communities. But Jesus also cured and healed the woman who was taken in adultery. He healed her of her shame, of her guilt, by saying to her straight out, "Neither do I condemn you. Go in peace and sin no more." He invited her to retake her life, to free herself, to heal herself. And the last one I'd mention is Matthew. Now, Matthew didn't have any physical ailment as far as we know, but he certainly had a social sickness. He was a tax collector. He was working for the Romans, the conquerors, the oppressors, and he was getting taxes from his own people to support the Roman army and the whole Roman structure. So he was living in a whole sea of hatred, distrust, rejection. And Jesus healed him of that by bringing him into the very center of his own life. He called him to be one of the 12. Jesus, moved with compassion, reached out to those who were in need or were afflicted, and he healed them. Now, I know we're also disciples today, and we're invited also to announce the kingdom, proclaim the kingdom in our world today, but also to heal. And I'm just looking at two words that are very current in our church today. One is respect. If we could all come to respect one another, if we could see one another as made in the image and likeness of God, if we could appreciate that the Father sent the Son into the world as much for him or for her as for me, and he sent his Son so that all might have life and have it to the full. Respecting one another. And respect, I believe, would help restore the dignity of each of us. It would help give purpose to the life of those who so often lack purpose, lack confidence. If they knew, and everybody knew, that we were respected for the dignity that we have. And also it would be a remedy to so much of what we might call hate speech, especially on social media. Some of the vitriolic stuff that people have to receive through social media. It really denies them the dignity they have. And the other word, it's floating around so much, is listening. And that means listening with the ears, the eyes, and the heart. It means hearing as well as listening. And if we were listened so much of our identity would be recovered, would be restored, would be healed. So much of loneliness in our world. I think it was about 6 months ago or so, there was a survey on loneliness, and some 40% of university students were considered to be living lonely. And as we know, loneliness leads to all forms of addiction, whether it be alcohol, drugs, sex, or self-harm. And if those people were listened to and not just talked at, they would recover so much from that loneliness. And I had the experience in Peru many years ago when we used to give retreats as preparation for confirmation of youth from 15 up. Several of the kids said to me after confession during the retreat, "Father, thank you, but that's the first time in my life that someone has really listened to me." And that shook me a bit. Like, they come out of families, and whether they're functional or dysfunctional, but they belong to families. They're in school, they've got classmates, and yet they feel they've never been listened to. What an enormous healing would take place if we could do that. And the other one, of course, is confidence. If I'm listened to, I have something to offer, I have something to say. And so if we could take those two, and to think about them for a little while and how we might live them, how we might contribute to a healing of our world. And I want to finish with one little story. Some kids were together, and they were trying to work out, when does night finish and day begin? And they couldn't really pin it down. So they asked the local rabbi, "Rabbi, tell us, when does night finish and day begin?" The rabbi thought for a moment, and then he said, "Well, day begins when you recognize the face of God in your neighbor." Thank you, and God bless.